Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Marshall Frank, and I am a retired police captain from Miami-Dade, Florida. I did 30 years, and I spent most of my career working in homicide, many years as an investigator, and later on in a command position. And when I retired from my 30 years, I was encouraged by a number of people that I should try to write books in my retirement. Of course, that was a pretty good idea because I had no idea what I was going to do in my retirement. I embarked on learning how books are written because I never had read a novel before, and I went to work in the private sector for 4 years, did a lot of traveling, which means you get a lot of time to read books, and moved to the mountains of North Carolina, where my wife and I embarked on our passions. Mine was writing, and hers is sculpture art. Fast forward, here we are now in 2015. I have had 12 books published, and 6 of them are novels, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today in this little video. I'd like to start with my last novel first, okay, which I really think is my best work. I'd like to promote this, The Upside to Murder. People might say, what can be an upside to any murder? Well, read the book and you'll find out. This is a story that has many examples of what I encountered in my career. And it's particularly important for a lot of social issues that come into our lives in today's world. It's about an African-American physician whose daughter is raped and shot in the head, but she survives. And he has a mistrust of the criminal justice system, and so he took it upon himself to do certain things and actions which he probably should not have done. But the bottom line is he's a good man, a loving father, a loving husband, but he got himself in deep doo-doo because he didn't know what he was doing. And the book has been selling very well. I have had good luck with it. I've had one award called the Don Argo Award with the Space Coast Writers Guild in Eastern Florida. And I'm very proud of it, and I think it's my best work to date, okay? The Upside to Murder. Before that, I had a novel written and published entitled The Latent. Now, when you hear the word latent, you might think, what does that mean? Well, you ever heard the term latent fingerprint? Well, latent means hidden. Latent means you don't see it. And when the crime scene officer comes to a crime scene and he throws the dust around and the print shows up, that becomes a latent fingerprint, turned into a patent fingerprint. Now you know something. Patent means visible, latent means invisible. Anyway, this is a story about how the criminal justice system can go wrong, and how people who are innocent can be roped into situations where they are not guilty, but yet the system thinks they're guilty and bad things happen. I'm very proud of it. I think it has a powerful story, and a lot of it is based on forensic evidence, particularly fingerprints and handprints, as we can see by the cover of this book. So I recommend it if you like stories that involve a lot of anguish and also a lot of forensic information. Okay, let's go to the book before that. It's titled On My Father's Grave. Sometimes when an author writes a novel and they wonder, where does he get the title from? Well, the title of this book came from just a quotation from one of the characters in the book, who's making a promise and he's swearing to someone that it's true information. And in doing so, he says, "I swear on my father's grave." And I thought that was the best title for this particular book. Briefly, what happens when a middle-aged woman who is the daughter of a Miami mafioso Don, and she's 40-something years old, and she finds out that her father is not her father. And she starts probing and saying, well, who is my father? And this is a shock to her. She's very angry that she was lied to all these years, and she goes after the truth to find out who her real father is, and that involves having to confront the mafia. It's a very compelling story, and some of it is based on true stories, okay? particularly this violin that's on the cover, I'm very proud to say, is a picture of my actual violin. Okay, the novel I wrote before that, titled Call Me Mommy. If you were to talk to my wife, Suzanne, she will tell you this is my best novel ever. It's the least police-related novel. There's criminal justice in it, there's crime and punishment in it, but the story is about good parent, bad parent, and the poor child that has to be dealing with the struggle between both parents. And of course, in a situation like that, the bad parent gets an awful lot of influence on the way this child is raised, and it evolves into a very emotional story. I recommend it if you like stories that might make you cry a little bit at the end, or even during the story itself. Suzanne, my wife, continues to tell everybody that this is my best book ever. I think The Upside to Murder is my best novel, but it depends on who the reader is, right? Okay. This was originally published by Harlan Publishing Company in North Carolina, who went out of business. And then when I recently had some interest in it by a motion picture person, I realized, well, we got to get this back in the market. So I had it republished under another publishing company. Okay. Dire Straits is another one of those books where I've had interest from movie people. And one time I actually had a contract by a movie producer who wanted the rights to the picture. And of course, the picture never got made. But this is one of those hard-charging police, drugs, crime, murder stories that emanate out of the wealthiest areas of Miami and some of the most decadent people that you might ever find in the world. So it's very fast-paced, probably the most fast-paced book of all my novels. And it has an awful lot of messages and stories in it, and a lot of it comes from true experiences, particularly in terms of homicide investigators who were so dedicated and so married to their jobs that they forgot that they were married to somebody else while they were working. And my very first novel is titled Beyond the Call. This was written originally as my first book because I wanted to tell the true story about race relations and the death of a black man in Miami who was killed after a chase by police officers. The community was in an uproar over charges of racism. When the trial was held later on, the officers were acquitted, and Miami's riots broke out on May 17th of 1980. It was a very bad time. I met with the public often, and this was when Janet Reno was a state attorney in Miami. And I met with the public often, and very often they didn't want to hear me tell them that this wasn't not an act of racism. This was an act of brutality, and the police were at fault. And as a matter of fact, I was the arresting officer of 5 officers who were charged in this crime. But I always contended that it wasn't because of racism. But a lot of people didn't want to hear that. And then Miami broke out in May of 1980 in the worst riots in the southeast United States has ever seen. So anyway, I turned the story into a fiction story after getting some good advice by an experienced author. And by turning it into a fiction story, but keeping the truth embedded, I was able to tell what the circumstances were behind this case in Miami back in 1980. Beyond the Call. Those are my novels. I just would like to plug one more book, which I think is important. One of the most uninteresting subjects in the world today, or in our country today, is criminal justice. It's interesting if somebody close to us gets involved in the criminal justice system. It's interesting if we're hearing about some sensational case. But for the most part, prisons and jails and police and courts and lawyers are something that we just turn a blind eye to most of the time because we just don't care about it unless it affects us. But I do think there's an awful lot of things in the criminal justice system that needs repair and change. No one's going to hold their breath, but I do address a lot of these things in this book called Criminal Injustice in America, and I think that there's some very innovative ideas that have come forth through this, and I've gotten a lot of good responses from it and a lot of invitations to speak at conventions and things like that. I have 5 other books, but I'll save that for another video someday. I hope you will be interested in what I've written, and have a good day. Thank you.